Sometimes a game comes along that really blows your expectations out of the water, and Protocorgi does just that, especially for its price point. Protocorgi is a shoot 'em up, both vertical and horizontal. It flips between the different levels, and you are controlling this corgi that can be weaponized with various different missiles, laser, bullets, and its own bark. And there's different ways to play depending on the level that you're in and what works for the enemies that you're up against, but also just generally your styles as well, and all of them are valid and they all have pros and cons. Protocorgi also has a roguelite element to it too, because when you start off at the beginning of the game, you have a couple of lives and a couple of continues. And depending on how good you are at shoot 'em ups, and I would say Protocorgi is going to test you quite a lot the further you get into the game, you are going to die. And so every time you go to replay it and get further and further, it then dishes out an extra life or an extra continue so that you can continue to get further, not only seeing more of the game, but also increasing your skill because you start to memorize different patterns and the things that you died before on the first or second time around. You're like, right, I remember this now. And in theory, you should do better. So it's a real good learning curve for everything that you do with Protocorgi. It also asks you to replay things over and over again, because the more that you replay the game on different difficulty levels, you're contributing to online scoreboards, but you're also unlocking pieces that allows you to then build your own levels in the Protocorgi level editor and generator. Oh yes, this comes with an entire online library where people can upload their own levels and you can play them, and they all have their own online leaderboards too. Easy for you to say. So, how does Protocorgi play and feel from level to level? Your armoured corgi has 5 different attacks. Bark is the one that stays prominent throughout the entire game, and this is, instead of holding down fire, you can just constantly button mash, and that just spells out BARK exclamation mark over and over again. The corgi yaps. Yes, you'll probably find that annoying. I still found it adorable after several hours, so I don't know, your mileage may vary on that. But it's one of those weapons that's slightly chunky and does a lot more damage than just pressing and holding. And so I found myself using the bark quite a lot in this game because it was useful, particularly when you're in really tight situations and spaces. The other next 3 weapons are all like lasers, shooty bullets, and like side weapons. And there's different variants and layouts of them, which you can collect throughout the different power-ups that you can collect from killing different enemies. But they're also all upgradable too. So once you upgrade something, what you'll end up doing is spitting out a power-up you don't need, and it will change to a slightly different variant or layout of it. So sometimes different layouts might send out weapons or missiles vertically. It might be like in a spread of bones, for example. It might be straight in front of you like a big fat laser. So again, you're constantly switching to think, okay, what is it that I want to use? But you can only do that by collecting the power-ups as you go. The game's well designed in a way that it will drop the power-ups that are quite useful for you in front of a situation just before it happens. However, you still need to be skilled enough to go and shoot the right weapons and collect the upgrades before, like, A, you get smashed, or B, you end up in a tight situation where you're going to have to use suboptimal weapon loadouts to try and survive. Nothing is unsurvivable by not picking weapon upgrades and all of that kind of stuff, but it does definitely help. The last weapon is just like an extreme power-up, which allows you to kind of smash everything off of the screen as well, which is quite cool. However, there is also your spirit buddy puppy. So, Protocorgi comes as a base corgi, but there's also like a secondary boxing pup that comes alongside you that's a little spirit animal. And you can send that out with a different button, and it's almost like a little static boxing puppy wolf that will then just punch whatever it finds in front of it. And this can be really useful for launching it into bigger enemies. Bosses are really handy to use this on because it can hit a hit detection box on a boss and just stay there as the boss kind of moves around, and sometimes it will drag the poor little pup with it, which means that you can be left just avoiding the enemy fire as things go along. There's different ways to use it. I found it exceptionally useful. However, whenever you fire out this spirit puppy, those 3 chunky weapons are all gone with it. So you're back down to your basic bark move. So you're going to have to button mash your way through all of your shooting. I personally didn't find that too much of a problem, but if you've got like waves of enemies coming from top, bottom, left, right and everything like that, sometimes you don't want to lose those extra 3 loadouts and layouts, because sometimes the lasers will shoot behind you or diagonally or something like that, so they're much more useful to have. But again, it's entirely your playstyle. You'll see how well you go. I really love the soundtrack of this game. There's some great, like, proper J-rock numbers in here. There is a singing beetle as a boss that does its own little J-pop track, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I really liked the variance of, A, the boss battles, but B, the different ways how Protocorgi challenges you as you go through the different stages. Each level is broken up into like anywhere from like 6 to 10 different stages, and they all have their own little mini focuses. So there are sub bosses that like run around the edge of the screen and shoot back lasers like it's bouncing off the wall, like Pong, for example. There's one where there's like an armadillo that runs around the edge of the screen, and you have to kind of, a bit like Centipede, like kill off different segments of it. There's one where they're firing off all different kind of like missiles at you, so you have to keep moving all of the time. There's quite a lot of staples here, but it's refreshed in a really interesting like palette of graphics and just different mechanics. And I felt like Protocorgi was trying to make each boss battle reminiscent of an old like arcade classic game, because it was borrowing things from like Centipede, Pong, Arkanoid and putting it into a Protocorgi shoot 'em up level with a boss in, and I really liked that kind of design. Outside of the main game, which will hand its bum to you, has various different difficulty levels and is really enjoyable to play, there's also level editor mode. Now, you start off with very little in the level editor mode, and it's through playing various different stages in the main mode repeatedly, and also killing a certain type of enemy a certain amount of times, then it unlocks it for you to build into the level editor. The editor is grid-based, so you can kind of draw out any walls or anything like that that you want to put into the level itself, but also then placing down enemies. They have like a green tinge around them. You're allowed to put up to 256 things into a level, so it makes it quite succinct and over in about 60 seconds. But there's plenty for you to do inside of that kind of level design. So do you want to make like loads of tight corridors for you to get around with floating junk to avoid? Do you want to spam loads of waves of enemies and see whether or not people can get a really chonky combo, for example? There's loads that you can still do in here, and then you can add any bosses that you've kind of conquered at the end of the level too, which is really handy, so you can extend the level that way. I found the level building really easy and simple to do, and whilst there aren't tons of levels out there at the moment, because this game is a very small niche one and has just launched out, there is plenty to be had here with online like playing with the levels themselves, but you can actually download them and keep them offline too if you don't have a stable connection, which I thought was actually a really good idea, and I think more level editor kind of workshopy games should be following that kind of process so that you don't have to have a constantly online connection. I absolutely love Protocorgi. I've had my eye on this game for a while. Delighted it has absolutely exceeded all of my expectations on launch. And I feature quite a lot of budget shoot 'em ups on this game. On this YouTube channel. Protocorgi is absolutely up there in the top tier echelon of budget shoot 'em ups. Go grab this game. I cannot emphasise it enough. Mwah! Chef's kiss. Protocorgi's out now. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/Higher Network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.